What does differentiation mean to you? Why is it important? How do you do it? Let's go.
To me, differentiation, you've achieved differentiation, like the elusive, how are you different? I think you have achieved differentiation in the truest or most valuable sense when a competitive alternative to you can say these words, no, we don't do that, right? That's differentiation. So that's the end state. So how do we achieve that? And I think that given that's the definition or how we are going to define differentiation or being different, wrap everything we're about to say, and that's the goal here.
Cool.
So there's a few things to take into account. The very important question in business is like, how are you different? But I actually don't think anyone buys and operates and goes through life that way. So let's give a more practical example. Erica, someone's like, I'm considering purchasing services from you, and I'm considering purchasing services from another content strategist. And internally, inside the business that's making this consideration, they're going to go, okay, well, what does Erica do? And they're going to go, okay, what does this other person do? If you can get them to say something very specific and the other person can't, or even if it is specific, it's going to be specific in a different way. And there will be the intuitive processing that is, I understand how these things are different.
Yeah, someone asked me that question. Like, yeah, I could give a spiel, blah, 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 blah. But pretend that it's the exact, a lot of it is very similar. There are many ways to get ahead of this and make yourself defensible. But just pretend that everything is very similar. Sometimes it literally comes down to vibes.
Okay, but vibe is how you also probably enter the consideration set, and it may take you across the finish line in a lot of senses. Like, people who come to us very much resonate with you.
Yeah, because I'm a person on the internet who just says a bunch of shit all day, and people are like, she seems cool, and then they want to work with me. Literally, though, that's how I've gotten a lot of clients, which is why I bring this up.
Right, but vibes is like,
just say it. It's okay. Not everyone can be as cool as me. It's fine. You can just.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm trying maybe that's what I'm dancing around.
I'm messing.
Well, look, vibes are certainly a consideration factor because they're going to be like, I feel like I'd enjoy working with you, right? That's what they're trying to say. And if they can't feel that with someone else, like you'll get the deal. Is that a differentiator? Sure, but it's not all of it, right? It might be a component of it. So I want to think about this in a few different ways, though. So people want to know what you do. And if it's unclear, if it's not specific enough, then they're going to go, well, how the hell are these two things different? And then you end up in the whole well, let's just go with the cheaper option if they're both the same. And that's the place nobody wants to be, right? This is a well-established line of thinking. You end up in the race to the bottom when you're that. So how do we get them to understand how it's different without them having to ask? And there's two main levers of differentiation that we pull, right? One is specificity. The more specific you are, the more different you become. And there's three things within specificity that you can drill into to be more different. And guess what? It's the offer formula that we've always talked about. The problems you solve, the person or types of people or businesses that you solve it for, and the process in which you solve it. The more specific you are, the more different you become. So when someone says, what does Erica do? And they go, oh, she does content, right? Not specific, not different. But if someone said, oh yeah, Erica will ghostwrite this LinkedIn post for you on a call while Nick is coaching you through the offer design process in this, if they get super specific on that and they say, well, what does this other content person do? And they go, oh, they're a content strategist. They do content, they do blog, right? Whatever the thing is, all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, I can see how they're different. Mm-hmm. You don't need to explain it to me. Now that was like a Fast and Furious example. We can drill into different examples of this, right? But the idea is be super specific. And if you are more specific on the problem, if you're more specific on to whom you help, or you're more specific in the process in which you help people solve the problem, pull any of these levers, and you don't need to weight them all equally across the board. You can solve a pretty standard problem with a radically different process. You can solve a very specific problem with a pretty basic process. But it's like, as long as you're drilling in somewhere, you're going to win.
There's one other thing that you didn't mention in that, which I think wraps into all three: problem, person, process, which is point of view. You're not differentiated just on your point of view, but I think that the way that you think about the problem and that you think about who you solve it for and that you think about how it should be solved gets wrapped into all of it. So point of view for me is like, it needs to be there, but it's not the only thing. I think people get really stuck on like, well, what do I think? And like, is it really that different from other people? It's more than that. Like, that's important, but it's embedded into then the offer that you create. What do you think about that?
I completely agree. The reason I didn't even include it in the list of like, what do you drill into, is because, in my opinion, that the point of view is how these things manifest themselves like in your reality, and how would you go about explaining those things. Well, you're capable of having a differentiated point of view, a unique point of view, if you have a very specific problem solving for a very specific person and you use a very specific process to do it.
It's just there. It's like point of view feels to me like a really big circle, and then problem, person, process are like floating about inside of that.
Yeah, we need like a master diagram.
We need a master diagram.
Shows all of how all of these things
I'm picturing floating bubbles, in case anyone wants to know what's in my head.
Yeah, I think there's floating bubbles because it's like, well, there's like POV wraps everything.
Exactly.
POV is the vehicle to communicate all of it. Because without having a point of view, how were people supposed to know?
Right.
Like that's what people grab onto. And largely, like, your point of view galvanizes or like allows you to internalize many of these things.
Exactly.
In these beliefs.
And we have a whole episode on point of view. If you're like, how do I develop a point of view and how do I share it? Go listen to that, because we've done that.
We've talked a lot about it.
Yeah.
And so point of view certainly matters. But if you're thinking like, okay, well, how do I just like be obviously different?
Yeah.
Instead of non-obviously different, or different in a defensible way. So here's kind of the rub with all of this. What we're seeing a lot of people do is they try to differentiate in ways that are the opposite of what the current, like the status quo is, or a competitive alternative. So if there's an issue in a workflow, they would say, oh, well, we have solved that problem through our service. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing that. You should do that. That's a great thing to do, because people can go, yes, but of course, like this has now become obvious that this is a sticking point for me. But it is not defensible, because everyone else in the world, especially in services, can just decide that they also do that, right? They can just, it is a tactic. It's a technique. Whereas if you get hyper specific on your offer, right, the combination of the problem, person, and process, if you get hyper specific there, a competitor would be like, no, we don't do that. That's not the thing that we do for people, right? We're going to get on a call with you for 1 hour a month, and then we're going to do this other thing. Like, we're not going to do, like, just tethering onto the writing example. There's no other way, right? Positioning is a really, really common one. There's a bunch of positioning people out there, and many of them are going to say the status quo is we do this thing, we takes a few months, we get a slide deck together, and we make that presentation, and we show you new positioning. And then there's like the positioning sprints. Like, oh yes, that's like a much more specific way to solve the problem. And then when you look at someone and say other positioning people take months, our positioning process is different from that. And they say, no, we don't do that.
Right. Well, what if someone was like, well, okay, we can do that. We can do it in weeks instead of months.
Totally. And then, so more specific, what is the output of that, right? So we're thinking like a lot of people now, us included, like they produce like wireframes for people as part of the primary deliverable. Mm-hmm. So people are like, no, we don't produce a wireframe for you. We don't turn your positioning into messaging. If we do that, all right, now we understand how these things are different without having to spell it out for people. They'd say, oh, well, we're going to get a wireframe out of this other company, and we're not going to get a wireframe from them. I understand now how it's different. I don't need to ask. So basically, if you can answer the question, what do you do, or how do you do it in this way, you are defining your differentiation. Because no one will think, like, if people got to ask how different these things are, I think you're probably already toast.